Hi there, I'm Bianca Hernandez, and today we have a very, very special guest that we're spotlighting, a special request by all of you. She's my sister, Bianca Hernandez. Hey, B.
Hi, how are you?
Good, and you? Can you tell people a little bit, those who don't know, which I feel like a lot of people listening to this already know you, already know what you do for a living and whatnot, but tell them a little bit about where you're at, what you're doing for a living, and that sort of thing.
Sure. So I am 21 years old. I currently live in Miami, Florida, born and raised here, obviously. I went to the University of Central Florida and graduated last May. So I graduated school in 3 years, and I was able to major in communication studies with an emphasis in health communications. And I got a minor degree in nonprofit management. So all in all, my passions have always really lied in health and kind of finding the cross-sectionality between health and public relations in the communication sector. So much so that I landed a great opportunity at an agency called Edelman. And I currently work in the agency life, and it's been a wonderful opportunity getting to support health clients on a day-to-day. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
And you talk about health, and obviously, again, if people know you, they already kind of know your story, but for those that don't, you've been very public about your diagnosis with IBD, Crohn's and colitis as well. So could you talk a little bit about what that is, break it down, and kind of GoFree and what your story's been with that?
Absolutely. So in short, I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis back in high school in the summer entering my junior year. So for those of you who don't know, I think the easiest way to explain it is there's this umbrella called inflammatory bowel diseases, shorter known as IBD. And under that umbrella falls Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. The better of the two, if you will, some people would argue, is that ulcerative colitis is less complicated as opposed to Crohn's disease. So kind of escalating forward, I was diagnosed with UC in high school. And then my freshman year of college, I actually was hospitalized that November. And that hospitalization, I had a combination of a flare-up with the norovirus that kind of escalated, and ultimately my inflammation got so excessive that I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. So I'm currently on medication. I get an infusion every 8 weeks to help maintain and kind of keep my disease at bay. But
and as far as like people too, I think I'm just gonna, for people that don't know ulcerative colitis, like this is the first that they're hearing of it. Like, what is that disease?
So everyone kind of jokes around. It's kind of like the pooping disease. That's like the taboo of it, if you will. But ultimately, it's when inflammation is caused in your gut, anywhere from your mouth to your anus. So for individuals with Crohn's disease, the inflammation can really be anywhere in the GI tract, as opposed to ulcerative colitis. That inflammation is more localized in the colon, lower rectum area, anus, obviously. So it's a lot easier to treat as opposed to Crohn's disease, where inflammation can be scattered across the GI tract. So with that comes the symptoms of bloody stools, the inability to really control when you use the restroom, having ulcers in your stomach, continuous mucus, bloody stools, discomfort, joint pain. All in all, everything that also falls under having an autoimmune disease coincides with having IBD.
Yeah, so definitely, I mean, from the description, and if it's a pretty common disease too, so you may know somebody that has it, but it is a disease that a lot of people don't like to talk about, so they keep hidden because it is embarrassing.
Yeah.
You don't want to necessarily showcase it to the public.
And I think the older you get, right, or the more, or actually even the younger you are, there's never really a good time to have a diagnosis like this, but especially in the prime of like high school or kids going into middle school, it's definitely a very touchy subject. It for girls, it's uncomfortable. For guys, it's uncomfortable. And a lot of people try to not talk about it. And that's where I think there's a lot of stigma around like burdening yourself and like keeping private something that's really present in your life, or at least that was what happened with me.
And so that's go ahead.
No, I was going to say that kind of propelled, I think, in a very weird way, that privacy of really keeping something that was so present, so real in my day-to-day life, not being able to talk about it is really what kicked off me kind of advocating and continuing really being passionate about healthcare. There's more to the story, but I mean, all in all, I'm very passionate about being able to vocalize and advocate for yourself as a patient. And number one, also being able to let those close to you really be part of your patient journey. I think that's caregivers are central in our day-to-day. And I think it's important to let people into your life, as hard as that may be.
And so we'll talk about a little bit, with that, you said, middle school and high school, obviously me as your sister witnessing it, and I know what it was like for you, but for you specifically, having gone through it and experienced it, it was difficult, painful, embarrassing, all the things. And then instead of cowering from it or wanting to keep it sheltered and private, you decided to, again, be an advocate and be a voice for others and start GoFree. So can you talk a little bit about what made you want to start GoFree and what GoFree is?
Sure. So I think GoFree was the final product was not necessarily ever what the initial thought was. So in short, when I was diagnosed, it was the summer leading into my junior year. And with my junior year came a lot of really exciting new opportunities. I was really involved with my drama club. I was involved in school. And I remember my disease really taking over my life. There were days where I'd drive to school and I'd have to stop driving to school because I was so tired, like being behind the wheel. Or there were days I'd got to school and I would like sleep in class. And then so much so when my disease got really, really bad, I'll never forget, I would have very present accidents in school. And there was one day that I'll never forget, I had an accident. And being a junior, 17 years old, 16 years old in high school, it was super embarrassing. So I locked myself in the bathroom and I called my mom and I said, I can't come back to school once this is figured out. So at the time I started getting involved with a community of friends who also had Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. And they also expressed like going to school sometimes was hard because they were nervous about like having an accident in school. Like I mentioned, one of the symptoms of IBD is the inability to even control when you use the restroom. So one day I had kind of come up with this concept of, what happens if we give students with IBD a safe way to use the private restroom and deal with their situation whenever they need to. And then also have support from like school administrators that know about the situation. So you're kind of like tackling two birds with one stone, right? You're giving students a safe place to go to deal with their really present and uncomfortable disease, but also letting them know that they have someone safe in school that they can go to. At least at my high school, it was really important to have like your person. And I had one teacher that knew about my disease from the very beginning, but having all my teachers know about it also helped me kind of navigate my studies, like have an understanding. If I slept in your class, it wasn't because I didn't want to sleep. I wanted to sleep. It was because I was really, really sick and I just couldn't even keep my eyes open. So that's kind of when the idea of GoFree kind of sparked. So at the core of it, it's basically a pass, an arrow to GoFree. And basically it grants students the opportunity to use the private restroom in their school communities, which every single school has, to deal with going to the restroom and having extended time to use the restroom if need be. Also to that, they also have the opportunity to carry an extra pair of clothes at the bottom of the sink if they had an accident. So I met with my school dean.
And it's like a private restroom. Like it's like, like it's this pass basically is like what you would show a teacher to then use, like not the public restroom, but like a special private.
Yeah. So actually as everything evolved, as I started learning things, right, the objective was to kind of destigmatize. So having the arrow was basically like for students to be like, what's that arrow about? And then you would talk about what IBD was at large. But then as I started getting a little bit of wind of it, it was really like weird to have like an arrow. It was even more like attention grabbing. So then it started just being like, an email, or it was a little bit more private. And those were things that were evolved, just like any company or anything you have, you start learning things as you go on, right? But I met with my high school dean, which huge shout out to Miss Alvarez. She was really the ones who gave me the foundation of, okay, this is going to happen and we're going to start with you. I was kind of like the guinea pig at my high school. There's Benjamin. And as I started meeting with more friends with IBD, I started noticing that like all of them wanted me to meet with their school administrators. So slowly but surely, I started meeting with school administrators from across Miami-Dade County, and GoFree really came to fruition. And then fast forward years later, I started getting really involved with the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation, in which I found out that Ali's Law was an up and coming law that was being passed to allow individuals with IBD access to private restrooms, not in school communities, in everywhere in public. So you're talking malls, you're talking arenas, you're talking everywhere. Think about it. When you go to a mall, they redirect you to like a public restroom, but inside of every store, there's a bathroom. So for people with an ostomy bag, or people who just have like the urgency to just use the restroom, they need to have it at the quickest convenience possible. So, I mean, GoFree was really the step in being able to really speak openly about my disease. And then somehow I started finding out that so many people had IBD and just nobody wanted to talk about it because it was so embarrassing.
Yeah, and like Bianca said, she, then that kind of spring forth you advocating not just in like the Miami bubble and like the Miami school bubble, but then you kind of took that work, you became part of the national board for Crohn's and colitis, and you started lobbying on Capitol Hill and, going to different cities and talking to different people and experts and talking about what the patient needed. For people who deal with this on a day-to-day basis and maybe are at that beginning stage that you were at years ago, what's some advice for them as far as how they might be able to seek help or how they might be able to feel like they're not alone?
I think from my beginning diagnosis to where I am today, there's been a lot of growth, and I don't think you can kind of ever prepare yourself for the things you'll learn with being a patient. I will say, I think something that has made me a better individual, and also a better patient, but also a really good communicator and advocate for others, is taking full ownership of my disease. Like I always was very quick to like dismiss having UC. And slowly but surely I started realizing like this is going to be really present in your life, and you're going to have to deal with this on a day-to-day basis. So I think my biggest piece of advice is to not shy away from the cards that you've been dealt, and to just really step into your shoes and just be like, okay, embrace it. I'm a patient. I think that's like with any diagnosis. Example, you're diagnosed with cancer. It's really hard to kind of escape that really impactful diagnosis because you have to live it day to day. So, and I think we've had people in our family, our mom was a cancer survivor. We've had people in our family who've really had to step into what it's like to be a patient. You become immersed in it, and sometimes you feel like a burden to others. And slowly but surely, you'll start realizing that your journey is everybody else's just the same. And people are with you in community, and people just want to be able to support you. But the first way in letting people come in and support you is if you are supporting yourself. And I think the first step in that is just really embracing the journey at its core, and just being able to say, I'm a patient. These are the cards I've been dealt, and now let me advocate for others. Let me support myself, and let me figure out how to best care for myself is really it.
And I feel like you talk about advocating, and it's easy probably for you to talk about it because you're the living example of it, right? Like for you do that each and every day, and it's easy for you, and you enjoy it, and you like it, and you thrive in it. But I think for other people, when they hear that, they, maybe they're scared or they're intimidated to feel like they have to be that voice for others. Like, maybe somebody's listening to this and being like, well, I don't want to be, that. What's something that you would say to them, like those people who maybe shy away from being an advocate, or just they want to contribute and they want to help, but maybe that's not the avenue for them?
I think in meeting so many different patients, so like Sophie had mentioned, I had the privilege of being part of the National Council of College Leaders, which was a group of individuals who came together who had IBD from all across the nation, who were college students, and we just advocated for everybody in school communities right across the nation. But I think at the NCCL's core, I found that not every patient has the same experience, and not every patient is built to just advocate. And there's some people who are a lot more reserved. There's some people who do really, really well with just showing up for somebody as opposed to speaking about their journey. And I hope people take from this podcast, I don't think a patient is only the attribute that I have to my life. I think I'm pretty well-rounded to a lot of other portions of it. But truth be told, being a patient is a huge part of my life, so I can't dismiss it. And the way that I choose to embrace it is I speak openly about it. But I have some of my dearest friends are really, really private about their IBD journey. But in some way, they've also been like a pillar of help to somebody else, because they've shown up for somebody at the hospital and just held their hand and just showed them how to open their ostomy bag and like dispense it. There's little ways, and I think that extends past being a patient, that you can just show up for people. We all have different gifts. And I think one of mine is to really just communicate and talk about things openly and honestly without shame in it. But I think there's other people who it's much easier to just send an email and just share links of resources that are really helpful, or showing up to like a Camp Oasis, which is basically like a week camp where people with IBD go to, and it's just being there's so many different things that you can do to support your community that doesn't necessarily need to be the same as the way that I've done it. I think definitely supporting laws that are built to support IBD patients, that step therapy reform, Ali's Law. There's so many different things that you can be backing and vocalizing and speaking out to, that just simply requires a letter to your local officials. That's one way that you can get involved that comes up to the top of my head.
Yeah. now to the questions that I feel like a lot of people have been waiting for.
Yeah, man, this is not IBD Central podcast, but I'm glad that we got to it because I think it's really important, and it's a big part of my life. But aside from that, there's a lot of other great things that I have going on. So
this episode, it's obviously usually my guests, if you listen to anything from the spotlight, they're people that I'm also kind of learning from as the podcast goes along. But this is obviously different because this was like a highly requested podcast. Everyone was like, we want to hear about Bianca. We want to hear about.
Which is so weird because I don't have a super exciting life, but whatever.
Well, I think it was just like a sisterhood thing. So, and for me, I wanted to not have to generate questions as many as I typically do. And I wanted to know what people wanted to know about us and about you. So the first question, we actually got asked it 3 times, is your favorite memory that we have together?
So I would probably say it's, Sophie and I have had Sophie and I went to different colleges. So I think we grew up together in the same room, in the same house. But I think the most fondest memories that I have was probably like our times in college together. So there were some weekends that I'd go visit Sophie at FSU, and there was a weekend she came to UCF as well. But we had some like really awesome trips together to spend time with each other. So we have dear family members who used to live in Ohio. And we always went back to Ohio every October for an event called Celebrate. And Sophie and I had like the best time at Celebrate, and it was a great opportunity to just come together. After so many like months of not seeing each other, it was a great opportunity to kind of touch base and kind of just spend good sister time together.
Yeah, that was a great memory too. Okay, next question. It is managing comparisons from family and friends and how to not let it affect your relationship with each other. I feel like that's a very loaded question.
That is a very loaded question. So I think a good place to start is that our mom and our dad, shout out to mom and dad, did a pretty phenomenal job, I think, at always reminding us that we were our own kind of people. And I think sometimes it's hard for siblings who are so close in age. Sophie and I are 15 months apart. I think something that was really important to me, I was super shy growing up and I was very insecure. So it could have really been very simple for me to just always be really insecure because my sister was a lot more outgoing than I was. But it was always really important for our parents to kind of put us in things that made us shine. It's like, I remember I was not like the ballerina, princess, dance. I didn't like any of that. And I played softball and I played volleyball, and those are the things that brought me joy. And my parents were really good at making sure that we were able to do those activities that reminded us that we were good at doing different things, and they were our own things to kind of shine in, if you will.
Yeah, and I think too, again, we're not comparative people, I think, by nature. I feel like that's not how I would describe us. And probably, as you said, because our parents were very much about like supporting whatever our dreams were. They could be the most randomest out of the box things, but if that's what we wanted to do, then they were supporting us 110%. And we have very open conversations in our household where I feel like if we ever at a point did feel, and again, I don't think we were ever really comparative, like my sister and I, with one another, but if we felt comparative with somebody else, we had those open and honest conversations. And like our parents are very good about bringing it back to a realistic level, bringing us back down to earth and putting us in check so that we didn't feel that way.
No, and I also think something to highlight is Sophie and I went to the same school growing up, like in elementary and middle, but then when we got to high school, we had different experiences. And then we got to college and we got different experiences as well. So I think as we grew older, we both had opportunities to do different things, and we never were forced to do the same thing, with the exception of like a dance class here or there. But it was very evident to me, like, I didn't want to do this. And I think something that's important is when your kids are very clear on what they don't want to do, don't push it. I remember like there were days where I was like, I don't want to go to dance, and I would have to go. And it was like, Mom, I'll make a deal with you. I'm not doing dance after the season. And that was the deal. Like very clear, fine lines of like what I was going to be expected to complete and what I was not going to be able to be expected to complete, if you will.
And it's funny too, because I hear this question and I read the question, and in my head, I'm thinking more like, like if I did really, like I was really good in school, or like not even really good in school, like school just came very easy to me. And like for my sister, it didn't come as easily to her.
I wasn't dumb, but school was hard.
yeah, like you're right, school was a little bit of a struggle, but our parents weren't comparative even like that. Like that's kind of what I think when I read the question, like where you're, you know, like did your parents say like, oh, you need to study like Sophia did, or like you need to be as outgoing as Bianca is? Like our parents never, like that wasn't conversation in our household, which probably has a lot to do with how we've all, not just my sister and I, but my brother, all have our own personalities, and we've all kind of done our own thing independently of one another. So hopefully that answers that question. Okay, next one. Our relationship from childhood to now, and this person that sent the question, they said that they and their sister used to fight, but now they're BFFs. I was like, we never really had a fighting stage necessarily, but
no, I think we had the constant bicker of you stole my clothes, you stole my shoes, you stole my this, you stole my that.
My clothes all the time. Bianca, let me just say this, let me get this out in the air. Still to this day, I will say she is infamous for stealing things of mine. Like I go home, mind you, I haven't been home, honestly, for about 5 months now, I haven't been home. And I will go home and there will be things of mine that I haven't seen for months. I thought that I might have lost them. I thought I might have given them away, and they're there. I don't know how she got them. I don't know where she stole them from, but they're there. And she steals all my stuff. And growing up, that would irritate me to no end. Like I would come into her room and she would be wearing my outfit. And I would literally tell her, you know, just tell me that you're going to, like, if you want to borrow it, I'll give it to you, but just tell me, don't steal it. That was our fight all the time, was literally that.
Yep.
And she's admitting to it now. I'm just having everybody be on the record.
I forgot the question. What's the question? Oh, fights. Okay, something to highlight is Sophie and I haven't lived in the same house, in the same like vicinity, in the same city in 6 years. 6 years.
Yeah.
So I think something to highlight is that Sophie and I's relationship growing up is very different from the relationship that we have now. And I think for a lot of other siblings,
I don't think it's that different.
It is because we don't see each other every day in the same house, but there's still things that we do every single day that I think are integral to the sisterhood that we have. So for instance, Sophie and I don't go a day without talking to each other. And I do these shittiest jobs sometimes of calling Sophie, but Sophie always calls me. And we always just like make sure that we tap in, like, all good, all good. Did you go have dinner last night? Did you see these friends? How was your night? How was your day? And just catching up on like day-to-day things that you would do if you lived together, I think establishes a really strong sisterhood. And also just like, you know, I am the one who's probably closer to home right now and closer to family. And I think also keeping my sister in check of the things that are going on at home that maybe she's not seeing on a day-to-day. And I think something that was hard for me to like swallow growing up was that growing up is hard. And I think you don't realize that until you start growing up. Like there's different seasons in life that require different things. So when I went away to college, for me, it was extremely hard. I'll never forget, like I would cry. I'd cry. I would come home for a weekend and I'd cry going back. I cried like a baby the day my parents left me at college.
That day we left, Bianca, was a hard day, guys. Me and my brother were taking bets. We thought she was not going to follow through with it. Like it was that emotional. It was not.
But it was more, I think, because for me, what I always remembered is like, I'm entering a different stage in my life and my close-knit family of always living together in a house was coming to like an end. And that for me was like really hard. And as you continue growing on, like my sister's now going to be moving somewhere else and going to be like transitioning somewhere new. And that's another like growing pain you have to swallow. It's like, okay, we're going to be across the country. How do we just make sure that we're still close? So I think as time goes on and as things shift around, the one thing that you have to keep at center, and our dad always like says it, is that like when you're together, you're never alone. And it's so true. When you're always in communication, when you're always still talking, it makes you feel like you're never lost.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I feel like our relationship has always been the same. We've always been close. We've never really wanted to bicker or fight. And I couldn't tell you like specifically why that is. I know growing up, we've had like friends of our moms or like other like young moms, like sit me and my sister down and ask us like, you know, what did my mom do that was special? Or like, what was
good? How are you guys so close?
Like how, and like, there's really not a magic answer. Like, I just genuinely like love my sister, number one, but number two, like I do, you know, I do. And like, you know, and
I love you too.
And that's just kind of how it is. I don't know. I don't know. We never were really big fighters growing up at all.
We're not. That is true.
Okay, next question. Things that make you laugh.
Oh. I think lately the things that make me laugh are also the things that make me cry. Like I'll laugh. It's been a very emotional like season, I think. There's been like a lot of shifts in my personal life and like professional life. And I think I find myself crying more than I do laughing, but in a very weird way. I'm extremely emotional. So like my crying is also accompanied sometimes with like tremendous joy. So like cry. But I think a good like sometimes I'll drive home, like I leave my boyfriend's house and I'm driving home at night and I'm like crying, but I'm also like laughing and singing and like joyous. I think as of lately, like I've been doing a lot of videos and recording videos and saving them to my phone, and I'll go look back on the videos. I'll be like, oh, this was such a good
like that. Wait, like videos of like you.
Yeah, so every year since 2019, I've been putting together like a video of the year. So I take snippets of like different moments of the year, and then I'll put it together in one big video and I'll watch it. And I sometimes look at those videos and it brings me so much joy that I like laughing and then I'm crying at the same time. Like in my time living on this earth, I have definitely cried way more than I've laughed.
We like to say that Bianca is just a deep feeler. She feels things very deeply.
All the feels.
Yeah,
I do. I feel deeply. Yeah. And for everyone who's very emotional, one of my dearest friends, Sloan Orange, is always reminding me. She's like, you should feel like she's the biggest believer and the firmest affirmer, if you will, of it's okay to feel all the things. And every time I'm crying, I'm always reminded, Sloan says it's okay, so we can cry. We can cry like in full flourishing of like big torrential downpour of cry and tears. And that's what we need sometimes. There's been a lot going on in our home life, if you will. And the joke is that like if someone's ever like emotional, I'll go up to someone, I like give them their hand. I'm like, do you just want to have a good cry? A good cry. And everybody's like, para comiendo tanta mierda. It's like, well, I think you need it. I think you need a good cry. That's how it goes.
She'll call me and she'll ask, like I'm not even emotional at all, but she'll call me and she'll be like, you want to cry together? We can cry together. And I'm like, no, I don't think a cry is what I need. But
yeah.
Bianca's a firm believer in the cry.
I am. I'm a firm believer in the cry, baby.
Okay. And the last question is your goals for 2021. And I love this question. Anytime I like goals, advice, I love hearing people's thoughts on that. What are your goals for 2021?
So I met an incredible guy. His name is Tyler Moon on the NCCL. And my first year was like,
NCCL is the National
Council of College Leaders.
Yeah, that's the acronym.
Yeah, and I met Tyler in January. I want to say of like 2018. Or no, I met him in May. And that year we were catching up on the year, no sé qué, and we were at this retreat. And in the beginning of the retreat, Tyler Moon was like, everyone needs to pick a word of the year. And it like stuck with me. It's like, oh my gosh, how can I pick a word that's going to define my full year? Because something that happens in January could be completely different in December. And it was like a prompt that had me thinking for like weeks. So sure enough, and for those of you who don't know, I'm extremely faithful. I think I'm a person of deep faith, and in prayer and just continued prayer throughout the year. There's always like different saints or different like scriptures that really come to mind and like stick with for a while. So somehow the words that I've selected have kind of coincided with faith. So like for instance, last year, my word was just being. The year before it was saying yes. And just like my word was yes, saying yes to all new things because I was always so scared to embark on a new journey.
I remember that year. That was a fun year.
It was a fun year. And sure enough, I think that decision of my yes, I said a yes to a lot of things I probably would have said no to. And they brought me, like countless possibilities I'll never forget. I went on amazing trips and I was able to really experience things that before I would have just been like, I'm too scared to do that. No, thank you. I'm famous for being like, no, thank you. No, thank you. And I was like, yeah, sure. Let's do it. And it was so unfamiliar, but so right. So every year after, the word that I stick to really means more to me than just a word. And this year, truth be told, it's really been an emotional year. And I think we're just in May and it's just starting off. And so much so, I think this year has been a very happy year, a year of a lot of celebration thus far. So I decided that my word of the year was going to be joy. And it was all about like finding the joy in the moments that are really hard. 2021 has been a hard year overall for my family, for my personal life. But it's also been extremely, extremely joyful. I'm in a new relationship. I'm starting a new big opportunity with work. And I think overall there's a lot of things to focus on that really, really spark endless joy. My life, it's funny, I was telling this to someone the other day. A year ago today, I thought I was moving to New York City for a summer internship. I was getting ready to graduate and I had no plans on moving back home. I had just bought a puppy. The puppy was going with my mom to Miami and I was going to New York and it was just going to be awesome. And now I'm a year later, settled into Miami and I have a new relationship, a new job. I'm back at home and everything just feels so right in a very weird way. But I think having full faith that everything's going to turn out fine. Now I look back a year later and I tell myself all the time, I would have never guessed that I would be where I am today. But boy, is it exactly where I need to be.
Yeah, it's like almost, could you imagine yourself being in New York now? No, probably.
I in a way, I can, but it's not how I would want that experience. And it's funny, just as seasons shift in your life, different expectations and different like desires also shift as well. I don't know, lots of joyous things to come. I'm sure this year's going to be filled with a lot of new decisions, a lot of maybe tough decisions. I don't know, but that's the amazing part, right? Is that we don't really have a plan necessarily set in stone, but a lot of yeses to hopefully be made. So
I love that. A good advice for 2021 to find the joy in every day. I love that.
Yes.
Bianca Lou, thank you for joining us here on the Spotlight. And if you don't already and you would like to find more information on Bianca and on GoFree, I will put her social links down below. And this is the final episode of the Spotlight for season 1. So you can stay tuned on thespotlight.co, Instagram and Facebook for more information on when season 2 will be coming on your streaming platforms soon. Thanks, guys.
Bye.